is Trump right to try and force a peace? I sort of think he is. I mean, you know, peace has got to be better than war, and it's what surprises me is the kind of the way so many of these European leaders and the establishment over here are throwing up their arms in horror at the very suggestion of peace, as if that's terrible. Now, I know we've got to be careful about Putin, but if we don't follow or if we don't react to Trump's initiative and we don't go down the fast path to some kind of deal, some kind of agreement to end this horrible conflict, it's just going to go on and on and on. It's going to cost us fortunes. You know, I just don't quite understand why Trump is coming in for so much criticism for trying to end this, even though if he's got skin in the game, America might get a good rare earth mineral deal and all that stuff. You know, surely peace is better than war. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. Well, now there was an article in one of the papers over the weekend while we were all worrying about Ukraine, World War III, the potential for World War III. The chances are it probably isn't in Ukraine. That might not be the place where a relatively small conflict explodes into a global conflict. Where that may well happen would be Taiwan. Now, China is watching the Ukraine war, is watching what Russia gets out of this, is watching what Europe and America do to curtail Putin's power. China's watching. And China wants to take over Taiwan. Taiwan, a island not too far from China in the South Seas. And experts are convinced that Xi Jinping could be on the cusp of launching a full-scale assault fairly soon, possibly very soon. For reasons that I hope will emerge during my discussion with my excellent next guest. He is a security defence analyst, Colonel Simon Diggins. Thanks for joining us, Simon.
My pleasure, Kevin. My pleasure.
Good to talk about something that isn't Ukraine, but I think it's all linked, really. Now, there are signs that over the past few months, China has been ramping up its military power and its potential for invading Taiwan to a great extent. We know that they've almost completed construction of one of the biggest ships the world has ever seen, and apparently they're going to build more. It's called a massive amphibian landing craft. I think to all intents and purposes it's a sort of huge aircraft carrier that's 300 yards long with the potential for loads of planes to land there as well. Possibly more pertinently also, they're building, China is in the process of building 5 massive kind of roll-on, roll-off landing bridgeheads, which would be able to receive not only aircraft but also ships, and would be the classic kind of piece of kit that would be used from which to launch an invasion of somewhere like Taiwan. So we're watching that. 2 weeks ago, there were these very, very active war games on the part of China, with fighter jets circling Taiwan in their own airspace time and time again, plus Navy ships, Chinese Navy ships, out in Taiwan shipping lanes practicing their war games. Saber rattling on the part of Beijing, no doubt about it. All of which leads to the suspicion, the potential, that Xi Jinping could be planning an invasion quite soon, and the reason would be partly territorial, chest beating. Look, we're China, we've taken over Taiwan, but possibly more to the point, Taiwan produces 2/3, possibly as much as 90% of the world's semiconductors. Semiconductors are what makes computers work. Without Taiwan, the West would be deprived of the main component of computers. We wouldn't have computers. America, Trump has just made an announcement saying we're really racking up our production of semiconductors. Well, they've been doing this for some time, but by common consent, It is unlikely that America will be in a position to be self-sufficient in terms of semiconductors for at least 7 or 8 years. Therefore, if Xi Jinping is going to invade Taiwan, he's going to do it before then, possibly much before then. The signs are worrying, are they not?
No, very much so. I mean, you laid out really well, Kevin. Certainly for the last 18 months, we've seen a whole series of exercises which have become increasingly sophisticated. They start with naval exercises. We've had air exercises. Initially started by day, then it's by night. We've had sort of fleets of Chinese ships circling Taiwan, and their exercises again has become more sophisticated. So they become sort of joint exercises with air and navy coming together. And as you rightly say, there's been a development of shipping, amphibious assault shipping, which can only really have one proper purpose, which essentially is to conduct a significant amphibious assault on Taiwan. Now, China does have other ambitions in the South China Sea. There's a whole series of island chains. They talk about this kind of the South China Sea being their territory, though no international law would recognize it as such. We've seen them building military bases on little atolls in the sea, areas that's disputed by the Philippines, by Vietnam, and various other countries as well. But the major amphibious shipping has really only got one role, which is to take over Taiwan. The timing is very interesting. It's put in immediate terms. A lot of the US, and the US is probably looking at it harder than anybody, a lot of the US experts suggesting somewhere around 2027 will be when China is kind of perfectly poised to do that. Now, this is where the coincidence comes in, because the analysis of what Russia is doing is if there is a kind of ceasefire, which will probably happen in the next year or so, maybe even less than that, then Russia would need time to reorganize, to reset after what's happened in Ukraine, and it'll be ready to go again in about 2027. So there is a theory, a grand theory, that both sets of dictators, and they are strongly linked, are looking for, if you like, the ability to do something in the next 2 to 3 years. That obviously sounds like a ghastly position to be in, but it's one of the reasons why, and one of the maybe better reasons why, the suggestion is Trump is keen to solve Ukraine so that he can focus on what they see as their major strategic competitor. Indeed, all US governments in 2014 have said is their major strategic competitor, which is China. So, yeah, it's a very dangerous place.
And let's get this straight. The reason we need to worry about Taiwan is, as the headline at the weekend stated, that if China attempts to invade Taiwan, it will make what's happening in Ukraine look like a tea party. In other words, there'll be no kind of ritualistic handing of money to Taiwan and look, you brave little island, defend yourself against China. The West will have to come in. And apparently the Americans already have a code name for the operation that will be triggered if China even shows signs of approaching Taiwan. It's called Operation Hellscape, which isn't very encouraging, to say the least. The first thing that would happen was if the West detected that Chinese ships, Chinese forces were on their way to Taiwan to invade, apparently the sky would blacken with a swarm of armed drones which would attack in their droves. So that's how it would start. Then after that, the West would have to start operating or responding militarily with jets, possibly ships. In other words, if China goes towards Taiwan, if we are convinced China is invading Taiwan, there'll be no ritualistic handing over of money and weapons. It will be war.
I've no doubt that all sorts of scenarios are being planned, and America's quite interesting in this one, because America has made no and makes no determination over sovereignty issues, which is why, curiously, there have been some sort of hands-off about the conversation over the Chagos Islands. So it makes no comment about China's claim for sovereignty over Taiwan. It has, however, warned China not to take Taiwan by force and will not recognize a forcible takeover of that. Whether that would translate into fighting is still to be clear. And it's something I know that American planners think about, and you're rightly identified that they will have identified it as a potentially trigger for World War III, a horrific conflict between two superpowers in the area. What they would do, though, I think, is up for some speculation. Whether they would be in a position to pick up intelligence warnings that the Chinese were about to do something, and then they reinforce it quickly. Whether they support Taiwan with weapons in advance, in other words, make Taiwan so unattractive a target the Chinese think twice about it, I think is something that they'll be thinking about at the moment. I suspect at the moment everyone's hoping they can somehow negotiate with the Chinese and persuade them that the consequences, which would hit China as well, of such a war would more than outweigh any advantage they might take by taking over Taiwan.
I'll tell you, it's interesting what you say about Trump and China and Taiwan. In one of his blizzard of press conferences, the guy has like 24/7 press conferences. One of the ones last week, can't remember which one, to be honest with you. I think it might have been when Starmer was in Washington. But he did say, so one of the press corps asked him in the White House, they said, what will you do about Taiwan? Are you worried about a potential Chinese invasion? And in his inimitable fashion, he said, I never talk about that. I never talk about that. What do you take from that response?
That I think he's very concerned about it, and that the normal Trump passing off and shoot from the lip performance, which we've seen across a lot of other very serious issues, doesn't really work. So that's why I'm saying that there is a reasonable, plausible explanation for his impatience with what's going on in Europe, is that actually his major concern is China and how do you deal with China. And that's sort of got through to him in a way other issues perhaps haven't done so.
And I think he's right there. I think we have China is a far greater threat than Russia ever can be, because unlike Russia, China is not only a military superpower, it's also an economic superpower. Russia has a smaller economy than Italy. It just spends most of it on weapons. So that's the nature of its power. In terms of what will Xi Jinping be looking at in terms of what's been going on over the past few days? The events, obviously, in the White House and the Oval Office, that bust up, some of which I think was a bit stylized, but certainly Trump and Vance are trying to make some kind of declaration to the world. I don't think you can doubt Trump's sincerity in wanting peace. Possibly in wanting any kind of peace, but he definitely wants peace. What will Xi Jinping be looking at here, and what will he glean from it? What sort of signs of weakness might we be talking about?
Well, I think he's already got that. I mean, we've got there at the moment their kind of rubber stamp parliament, and also their National People's Congress, which is actually the kind of the Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, are actually meeting. They call it the two sessions, and these organisations meet simultaneously. They're actually meeting at the moment, and they were delighted by the chaos which they saw on Friday, and they've used it as a propaganda opportunity already to say to the world, this is what Western democracy looks like. It doesn't work. So they're using that already, and they've been watching this campaign in Ukraine really, really carefully. I mean, there is a view that there was even a possibility when soon after Putin invaded in February 22 that Taiwan would be attacked very soon afterwards. Then Putin was stopped quite quickly, and I think the Chinese then pulled back. The Chinese, and also in the past, have been very conservative with the Russians, and in exchange for some supply items, usually dual-use items to the Russians, have also restrained them in terms of things like nuclear weapons and everything that went with that. So we've had bellicose language from Putin, but we've also the Chinese Communist Party saying, do not use nuclear weapons. This is not the time and place to do so. However, if Putin is shown to effectively to have won in his own terms as a result of the campaign and then the peace and the ceasefire that might follow, then that might indeed embolden Xi to do what he may do, which he's got his legacy to think about. And for him, his legacy is, I want to take over Taiwan. I want to completely unify all the China that existed prior to the Chinese Communist Revolution in 1949.
In terms of, Keir Starmer now we saw over the weekend seems to be oddly kind of restyling himself as Europe's warrior-in-chief, getting together what he optimistically called the coalition of the willing, which, trust me, push comes to shove, will turn into the coalition of the unwilling. He is assuming that yes, there's a very real possibility that fairly soon Europe won't have the backing of America in its support of Ukraine. But he's talked about sending boots on the ground to maintain the peace. Macron has said that the French might go in as well. But realistically, Simon, could Europe carry on backing Ukraine successfully without an American backstop? Because I'm doubtful, because mainly I think as things stood over the weekend it looked all right, but trust me, when push comes to shove, France, Germany, they'll all start dropping out. Without America, I think the prospects are pretty bleak, aren't they?
They are. I mean, I don't quite share your pessimism on that. I mean, I think actually the Europeans in the past have shown that they are capable. What they've not shown at the moment is the ability to hold together as a group. Mm-hmm. And that's been the most important thing the Americans have did, along with, let's be honest, providing a significant element of the umbrella which the Europeans weren't prepared to pay for. So there's two elements. One is the physical element of it. The second element is a infrastructure of, if you like, of will, and we're going to hold this whole thing together. The whole idea of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is not just about countries coming together. It's actually you're bridging the Atlantic from there. So it's going to be harder for the Europeans to do it, but the Europeans can do that. They have done it. There are some European federal military organizations which have existed. I've worked with them in places like Djibouti, and they're not ineffective, not least which because they've been used to working under kind of the if you like, the NATO training auspice, so they understand how to work together from there. Whether politically, in terms of will, they can do that is really going to be a big test of it. But I don't think we have a choice. I mean, even if we cobble together something now in Ukraine, with or without a more or less willing America saying, here is the backstop for all this, the basic message that's come across, not just from President Trump or Vice President Vance or from Peter Hegseth, is you're on your own. And this is not new. This should not be news to our leaders. We had President Obama, always seen as friendly to Europe. President Obama in 2014 very clearly, very publicly said to the Western world, to NATO, that the American strategic pivot is now to the Pacific. So even if we manage to sort out this particular issue around here in Ukraine, we should have no doubts, no illusions whatsoever that we need to do something much more effective, much more kind of coherent and effective in holding our defence together within Europe. So, I mean, we don't really have a choice. I really do believe that. You're not wrong about some of the challenges that are there. You're absolutely spot on with all those. I'd recognise every single one of those. But I do believe, actually, with this kind of pressure we've got, we could actually make something work, but it will not be easy.
So to go back to how we started this conversation, the way we behave now, Europe, and for that matter, America, is very important in terms of the way the Red Dragon may behave going forward. So these are difficult times, tense times, yes, Simon?
I think I prefer the Chinese thing. You may live in interesting times. I think we've cracked that one.
Yeah, interesting times is one way of describing them. Simon, very interesting to talk to you, though, as always. Thank you so much for your time. Security defence analysis there, Simon Diggins. I mean, again, as I say, I get it. It's very important what we do going forward, but I'm just not thrilled by the fact it's people like Keir Starmer and Macron who are holding all the cards here, going forward. I'm getting a bit fed up with these people telling us what's good for us, just like they told us what's good for us in the COVID crisis. They're now telling us what's good for us when it comes to Ukraine. Maybe we should have a say in it.